here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the bassist, vocalist and songwriter. It's the one and only Greg LoPiccolo, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Was in the Boston-based band Tribe and has gone on to do lots of other creative and musical things that you'll find out about in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interest and a casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Greg, it's over to you.
There's kind of two big phases when I was a teenager and I can't tell you why this was. I have no idea, but I had two brothers, I was the middle brother, and we were really into sort of British art rock. We listened to Yes and Genesis and Gentle Giant and those kinds of bands. Pink Floyd, obviously, and also things like, Steely Dan in Chicago and so forth. But it was really, I was huge fan of like 70s art rock.
Art rock.
So I got to college in 1979 and was disabused of that, which was, so, and then shifted into Talking Heads, Clash, Sex Pistols, Devo, new wave, basically.
Yes, new wave. Well, it's interesting because I'm the youngest of three and you're the middle. So yes, I had an older brother who was 7 years older than me, and he was very much into his prog rock. So he had his kind of little record player, and he had his kind of box of records with plastic. He had plastic outer sleeves to protect the albums because they were those gatefold Roger Dean artwork, weren't they? And so he forbid me to go into his room to play his records. So obviously, when he was out, I'd sneak in and sort of was just curious. So I used to listen to all those Yes and Genesis and Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harvest albums that he had, because obviously, I was quite young at the time, very young, and was just very curious with all this kind of music that I'd never, wasn't in the charts. I think there was a program called the Old Grey Whistle Test that,
Yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah.
It would have probably been on there, but I would have been in bed by then, and, it all seemed a bit mysterious. But I was fascinated. I have to say, I was absolutely fascinated with these records. And so I do have a love of a lot of prog rock. And then doing this show, you mentioned Gentle Giant, which is a band that he didn't like, but I got an interview with, was it Derek, who's just got a book out from Gentle Giant this year.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it was quite nice to sort of just listen to the music for a couple of weeks to sort of get an idea of what Gentle Giant was all about. So
they were something. Yeah, and we're never big here. I can't even remember how we in Bennington, Vermont, learned about Gentle Giant. It was back. There was no internet, right? It was like you'd go to the record store or you'd hear things on the radio, and that was kind of it.
Yes. Well, it was a period of, I suppose, men with long hair, sort of long coats. There was a sort of an image in this country, but it was very much people who got into that sort of prog rock was kind of people who were a little bit nerdy, were going to get. I suppose we're a little bit focused on getting qualifications and getting some sort of education. I know it's a bit of a sweeping statement, but they were definitely going in that direction of sort of intellectualizing music a bit more than because I came from the area in sort of a countryside in East Anglia, which is on the east side, and it was very much heavy metal and rock. It was like your famous Status Quo, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, it was leather jackets with denim on, cut off denim with lots of kind of, aggressive looking sort of, pictures of graves and death and motorcyclists. It was that kind of image. So it was kind of an interesting divide, I suppose, looking back on it. People like, you might have liked Bruce Springsteen or Meatloaf, but you never met people who liked the same. But I sort of think they're both quite similar, but somehow the audience was so different.
Well, there was all these kind of cultural lenses through which you would look at things, which with the benefit of hindsight, now it all feels different. But even that stuff, when I was like 15, 16, I loved that. But then when I was 20, it was explained to me that was like passe and bloated and, and here's all these new things. And then, got my head around that, and now I'm old and I don't care, I don't have to like satisfy anybody else's opinion. So I've kind of come so full circle to some degree. I didn't listen to any of that music for years and years.
Decades.
And now the other thing that, and I'm sure you have your own perspective on this, but the internet, specifically YouTube, is you can just go listen to anything you want, and so like that's something happens to me all the time. I go down rabbit holes, of like, oh, here's a live recording of this, of something I didn't even know existed.
Yes, well, absolutely. I think Gentle Giant brought out a triple CD box set of a live recording that is unearthed. So.
Yeah, so which is great, actually. That's one amongst all the kind of, angst and, so much of it warranted, I think, about streaming and, it's difficult for musicians now in many ways, certainly, in terms of trying to put together a career. But boy, is it cool to have access to all this stuff.
Well, was music in your area and generation, was it very tribal then? Would you say it was a tribal period of being into music? Because it was in this area, it was very much, you had to be a little bit careful and a bit cute about sort of who you liked or didn't like, because you would just get chased down the road and beaten up a bit, in a sort of 70s way. You didn't get, it wasn't, you might have got pushed over and kicked a few times, which all seems rather romanticized now. But it was just a bit of a beating rather than anything death related,
Well, for certainly as a teenager, no. But I was in a isolated rural area where like people would share stuff, but there wasn't that kind of sort of cliquishness. When I got to Boston, and then because there was a scene, like a robust, thriving scene that had some very strong cultural, we approve of this and we don't approve of this, where people had, like very strongly held points of view about, what constituted appropriate rock music.
Cool and uncool, I suppose, wasn't it?
Exactly.
It was very good.
Was very much,
because in this country, especially in the 70s, not many people would go on to further education and university. But what happened to you when you got to 16? Did you go on to college and sort of another world?
Yeah, I went to a college in Connecticut, and got my degree, and but which was of all things in German, just sort of somewhat randomly. But after a couple of years, though, I took an elective course in electronic music. They had electronic music laboratory there. And I was immediately captivated. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I want this. I want to do something related to this in my life. And so, barely finished the major because I spent all my time just like playing with synthesizers and computers and, recording gear and so forth. And then moved to Boston with a vague sense of like, oh, I'll do something. And then as soon as I got to Boston, I had a shitty job, like everybody, but it was immediately apparent. It's like, oh, there's bands. There was like all these clubs and there was like, hundreds of bands. And it was like, oh, this is what we do. This is what people do in Boston musically. So I bought a bass and I learned how to play the bass and I started a band.
Right, my God, yes, because talking to your photographer there, not yours, but the man of the scene, Michael Gretko, I think that's how you pronounce his surname. I mean, he gave the impression that all the bands who were coming from the UK before doing New York would go to Boston, play Boston, get themselves a little bit acclimatized. This sort of 5-hour time difference, and also at that stage, flying was just, and being in a different country seemed like a very wow, how do people do that? So it would have been very exciting. So you must have seen all these, like, I don't know, bands like Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson and all these British bands sort of playing in small clubs in Boston. Did you pick up on that scene?
That first wave that happened a little bit before my time. I didn't get there until 1983, and I wasn't in a band until 85. It took a couple of years, and the first wave of that stuff, like, U2 played, like there was a club called The Rat, this like famous club. I'm sure it's in the book. It was like the preeminent, sort of indie rock club in Boston, and U2 played there, REM played there, all these bands that went on to be gigantic. But that was all like 79 to 83. Mission to Burma were like local heroes, but by the time I got there, that had all kind of died down, and it was just sort of a general cycle of certainly bands would come. I saw the Sugar Cubes probably in, I don't know, I guess like 89, 90.
Oh yes, yeah.
So certainly there was a constant stream of bands coming through, and there's a zillion college students in Boston, so it was very much a hotbed of sort of alternative music. Got a lot of attention, and it was a fertile ground, and much smaller than New York.
So on that sort of, because you mentioned these sort of bands like Talking Heads and that sort of first wave of almost post-punk bands, and then there was in the UK there was another sort of wave that we had, I suppose, two-tone. Then we had that kind of new romantic sound, and then there was other things like goth and psychobilly started to appear, and then it was a kind of indie pop, which I thought was very important in the 80s. From 83 to 87 was kind of a golden time for indie pop. It was also the years of the Smiths, let's face it. Did they come on your radar sort of 83, 84 time? Did they sort of enter your consciousness at this stage?
For me, no. I would say that I really got immersed, where I was paying close attention 85 on, I would say.
Right.
Yeah, I certainly remember the Smiths. I remember, when How Soon Is Now came out. That was a big deal.
Well, absolutely. It was our sort of stairway to heaven, wasn't it, for indie pop?
Yeah.
A song that lasted 5 or 6 minutes.
No, it was on MTV. I remember the video very well. It's like, wow, was the whole aesthetic of that was super appealing. And
absolutely. Yes. And I guess, and for you, I guess MTV would have started to be a big thing in your cultural life as well.
That was kind of an extension of radio. Like in Boston, there were 2 rock radio stations that mattered. There was like WBCM, which was the big mainstream station that would play, Led Zeppelin and Tom Petty and AC/DC and so forth. And then there was the alt station, which is much tinier, but they and they played all the kind of alternative and new wave stuff.
Yes.
And my band Tribe actually got into rotation at that small indie, right? And that kind of that got us going. Actually, that sort of put us on the map in Boston, as we had like a single that was in rotation, and then everybody sort of decided we were a real band.
Right. Yes.
See us,
So you got your bass guitar, you were sort of rehearsing away with great enthusiasm. So then how did the band form? How did Tribe become what it is or was?
There was a guy when I was at college. I said I was moving to Boston, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, you should look up this other guy because he's a musician." And I was like, "Okay." I took his name and number, his phone number, back when you would do that. And 6 months after I got there, I was working my job, just surviving, and I came across the number. I said, "Oh, I should call this number." And I called it, and he lived like a block from me. And so I went to visit him, and and we decided to start making music together. So he had a guitar, he played guitar, and we started to write songs. And there was the kind of the local sort of alt weekly was called the Boston Phoenix, and in a classified section, and that's where you would find, that's how you'd fill out your band, seeking singer, seeking drummer. And so we started, we put ads in and cycled through a bunch of people for, I'd say, 2 years of just random people, coming in and out and not working out. And then Terry, the keyboard player, showed up and stuck. And then Janet, the singer, showed up and stuck, and then Dave, the drummer, and then we had a lineup of 6 people, and we did that, and then we started, writing songs and gigging, and I'm going to say, like, after, I don't remember the specifics, but after about a year or 2 of that, the original guy, this guy Mike that I had, originally connected with, bowed out. It was moving in a direction that he didn't, wasn't for him. And so then the 5 of us, proceeded on.
Yes, and it was quite a nice dynamic, I would imagine, having 2 women, 3 men in the band.
It was an interesting dynamic. We started out, we really were not good. We like a few. Eric and Terry started out good. Like they could play. They had like music degrees. Sophisticated, musicians. I learned on the job. The drummer learned on the job. Janet, the singer. And so we were playing Tuesday nights in empty clubs for a few years, and then we started recording. I was into like home recording, so we built a studio in the basement of this house that we all lived in the house in a part of Boston called Brighton, which is kind of this working class neighborhood. And we rented this house and we built a little studio in the basement, and we recorded a few songs. And then, like you would do, you'd send your tape off to the local music guy at the radio station. He would listen to them, and he had a show on Sunday night. He would put 20 new songs on, and we got on that with the song that we had recorded in the basement, and that kind of kickstarted things. And then we wrote more songs, and we got better, and we built a following till I don't know, by the early '90s we were like a big band in Boston.
Well, yes, absolutely.
We just
My God.
climbed the ladder, just like methodically, just like worked our way up the food chain, and improved, and by the time we were done, I think we were a good band. We played well, and and Eric and Terry were like compelling. I mean, sorry, Janet and Terry. Yeah, there was an interesting looking band, I think.
Well, yes, from the photograph, it was quite a striking image, actually. So that first recording, was this the EP, the 4-track EP you put together or bought?
It was actually before that. So the two of the songs on the EP were the original radio singles. But yes, that the first EP we recorded in the basement. Yeah, and then we paid to have it pressed, and we would drive them around to the local radio stations, and we sold a few.
That's fantastic. And did you come across this band called the Human Sexual Response? Had that
Sure.
been on your radar?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Were they the kind of the big or the main Boston band at the time?
One of them, and we did catch the tail end of them, because it was like bands like the Neighborhoods and November Group, and Mission of Burma. Were the sort of big bands that preceded us.
Yes.
And then Human Sexual Response then broke up, and then some of the people in that band turned into the Zulus, and we were huge fans of the Zulus. We would go see them all the time. So yes, absolutely, they were
right. They were the main.
They were big.
And I know that Malcolm, the drummer, Travis, he went into Sugar, didn't he?
Right, exactly. Yep.
Which was quite something. Who have reformed, which is even more bizarre, which is rather interesting. So yes, they've got some live dates coming up this year. So it'll be a very intriguing sort of. Yes, it's interesting that Bob never sort of reformed Husker Du, but he has reformed Sugar. So I'm not sure. We'll see. Were you a fan of Sugar, by the way?
I was a fan of Husker Du, and then to some degree, I was certainly familiar with Sugar. I had the records. I guess I would say that I was. Yeah.
Yes. Wow, it was hard not to like them, really. I mean, they caught a moment. His solo album was good, Bob Mould, but then yes, it came. So then, once you got the first album, Here at Home. So was this one that you self-financed at this stage, or had you got a record label at this point?
No, that was self-financed. We had a manager who helped, who came into the picture, who was like like a professional, actually had a music career. Of all things, he was Tony Bennett's, Tony Bennett, the pop, singer. He was Tony Bennett's son and Tony's manager. And at that point, this was maybe 88, 89. We were like big enough in the club scene, so he would come up. He was actually managing another Boston artist, and somebody said, "Oh, you should watch this band Tribe," and he did, and he sort of saw the promise, and so he approached us and said, "I'd like to manage you," and so he was involved in putting together that that first album, the first CD, the Here at the Home CD, which we did in
Yes.
various little studios around Boston, which I haven't listened to in a long time.
Yes, I
Anyway,
can't remember if that's on Spotify actually. She said,
it's not the only two that are on Spotify are the two who do Slash Warner Brothers records that we did, you know,
yes,
more than
Abort and
years later.
Sleeper. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting indeed. Yeah. So when that happened, at that stage, I mean, music was changing. I mean, and you realise that, looking back as well, how much things change at that point. From that early '80s, mid '80s, and then towards that latter part where you were happening. There was a lot of bands that were kind of changing their sound. There was to be honest, by then, '87. A few bands that I really liked were struggling. I think most bands have especially in the UK, had a bit of a 5-year narrative. They get together, honeymoon phase, they get a single out. John Peel was this DJ that we listened to on
Yep.
Radio 1, which was really important, and that would just get people's attention. Then a John Peel session at the Maida Vale Studios, which was always sounded quite good. And then, as you know, with the UK, it's tiny, and all these cities and towns all had an indie night. So people would get their transit van and off they'd go to play in front of 150 kids, but not people they knew, which I think kind of helps. And then the first album, things are good, everyone's happy. Second album could be good, but the third album, there's a lack of money, a lot of tension in the band, and that's the end of the band. But so, yes. But
Common
then,
story.
and that's a classic, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I know. I mean, we moan about David Bowie's 80s work and Tin Machine, but you think, my God, he's been going since the 60s. I mean, most people have a little bit of a dip. Well, most people have given up, but, he still did things, but that's a whole nother story, isn't it? But, but then sort of there was that kind of, for us, there was that element of like ecstasy came along. And, I mean, there's always drugs and, alcohol in music a bit, but ecstasy seems to sort of give people this kind of new wave of dance. And then there was a sort of grunge scene happening and a bit of shoegazing. So I think a few people were sort of like, I remember people like the Primitives and the Mighty Lemon Drops were thinking, no one's interested in another album from us, are they? They're really into that next sound. And we're not sounding like a Manchester band with a dance rhythm, and we're not particularly grunge. So, we're just going to give it up now. So how did you kind of cope? Because music was starting to sort of shift quite a bit at that stage.
So we got signed to Slash in 91, I think. And we got a budget to make a real record in a real studio, which was produced by Gil Norton, who had done the Three Pixies records, which it was the bands, in the late 80s that were the most impactful upon us were the Pixies and the Throwing Muses.
God, 4AD records.
Yeah, exactly. 4AD, Cocteaus, like those kinds of, like that was what, like everybody in the band was really into those bands, and took a lot of inspiration from that. And then we came out with the Abort, which was all the songs that we had built up, and like most of the songs on Here at the Home were re-recorded for Abort. It's I think it's mostly the same songs, and that went pretty well. And we did a tour opening for the Psychedelic Furs.
God, that's amazing.
American tour.
That is incredible, because they obviously had their big singles and big moments, hadn't they, at that stage?
It was almost, it seemed like a bit of a reunion tour, right? They hadn't done anything, significant in a few years, this would have been 91, 92. But a great experience, loved it, and we were like building an audience. We'd go town to town, and then the record sales would, pick up a little bit. And then they moved us from Slash to Warner Brothers, because Slash was kind of the farm team a little bit for Warner Brothers. And they kind of fumbled the handoff. So the record really didn't never get the support at Warner Brothers that needed. And it faded away. Didn't sell. Sold well enough for us to get our option picked up. And then we made another record with John Porter, who had done Smiths.
My God, John Porter's a fascinating guy, because I managed to track him down and do an interview with John, which was just fascinating, because he'd been, I think, a member of Roxy Music in his very early days, actually.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, I think he worked on For Your Pleasure, and he might have played on it as well. But he was a bit of a go-to sort of man, wasn't he, at that stage? He was
Yeah, well,
lovely.
we certainly knew about him because of because of his work with the Smiths, and some other bands, I think, of that ilk. And the second record, frankly, just most people don't think it's as good as the first record. I think there's some good stuff on it. But we weren't getting along that well. We had a lot of tension in the band, like stuff that just in retrospect feels silly, but it was very important at the time. And then the second record, didn't really have any singles that, did anything. And then, kind of died in the marketplace, and they dropped us. And, pretty quickly after that, the band broke up.
Yes. Well, going back to Abort, I mean,
Yeah.
there's some amazing songs on it, like Joyride. I saw the film. Can you
Yeah.
remember how these songs, how did you sort of work as a band? Did you have a particular songwriter? Did you come together as a band and jammed
We
an
had
idea?
we had two main songwriters. I was one. And I would basically just work up demos, usually just on multi-track. Like I would, like put up a drum machine and, play the bass part and sing, and, work out and then come to the band with usually a pretty finished demo. And then Terry started writing. And she would essentially do the same thing with Eric. She and Eric were a couple. Basically they met in the band, and they're still married now. They're friends of ours. And Eric was a proficient, player, arranger, knew his way around recording gear and so forth. So he would sort of produce her demos, and I would do my own, and then I'd bring them to the band. And it was, roughly 50-50. I think the first album, I think I wrote about half the stuff, and she wrote about the half the stuff. And then the second album, she wrote most of it, and I wrote a few things.
Right. God. And did your writing style change much in that period?
I think I get better. Like the earlier songs, I cringe a little bit. I'm sure that's true of a lot of people. I'm like, oh boy, and having, certainly access to, and specifically Eric and Terry, who were, like really interesting musicians with good ideas, and, and had ways of like expanding the palette in ways that, sort of mattered to me.
Yes.
No, but it was all very naive, right? We were just chip away at it and try to come up with stuff that we thought was cool,
Because it's you created on that first album. There's some like Outside again. That's an amazing song. I mean, how did that song come along? Because I don't. Is this? Oh, that's actually another one that you wrote, wasn't it? So how did that? What was the genesis of that particular number?
Boy, I don't. What do I remember about? So I was really into like MIDI and sequencing, because I wasn't a very good musician. Like now I'm a proficient journeyman bass player. I'm I learned how to play bass through the being in the band, but I wasn't. I couldn't play guitar. So I couldn't. It was hard for me to write, and I didn't really like writing on bass, and so I would write with a sequencer. I would just do it. And that whole guitar, that the edged style dotted eighth note delay guitar part was a sequencer part,
right?
And so I worked out the change, using a sequencer, and then did the demo, and brought it to the band with the ideas like, oh, Eric could do that, with a dotted eighth note delay, which he did, so that's kind of where it came from. And that's kind of all.
And was it quite a quick process as well, or was it sort of quite a laborious kind of time that took a bit of weeks or months to sort of finalize?
No, it was pretty quick at that point. We just like bang out these demos. It didn't take that long.
And your opening track, Here at Home, I mean, you've co-written that with Eric. Again, was that one that you sort of would bring bits to the song to each other and then sort of see what the other one brought, or did you sit down together?
No, that was very. I do remember, like the verse change, which was like cool. It's running in my head, but just that chord progression. I think Eric came up with, in a jam or whatever, and he tended not be inclined to write. He just, he didn't have that specific set of neurons firing or whatever, because he was, like very inventive, and very musical guy. But it was just sitting around. I was like, I know, I'm going to make that into a song. So I grabbed that change, added the chorus change, added the bridge, and did the vocals basically.
Amazing. No, I mean, it does. And I have to say, Janet's or Terry, the vocals are just brilliant on the songs as well. I just think that it just has a really nice vibe, a sonic texture to it. So you must, I mean, sort of, when you listen to it now, do you still enjoy it? Or if you've listened to it at all?
I don't listen to it often. I think it holds up pretty well. I mean, something that's been said about it, which I'm sort of proud of, is I think there's a pretty good breadth of sounds and styles and so forth in that record, which is something, kind of a grievance I have with a lot of bands in the meantime. It's like you'll listen to, some band, they'll have like a distinctive sound, you buy the record, it's like, oh, like 12 variations on the same theme, where, and I thought that first record, partly because it was built out of stuff that accumulated over probably 4 or 5 years, but I thought it had some breadth. Like Abort does not sound like Joyride, does not sound like, a lot of Terry songs, and I'm sort of proud of that aspect of it, yeah, I think it holds up pretty well.
Yeah, no, I think anybody who hasn't heard it should definitely check it out, because it is a great album. So when you came to do your, Sleeper, which is the third or the last album, the third and final one, did you go into, how long were you in the studio with John Porter for that? How long did that session take?
This is a guess, but I'm guessing a couple of months. Because there was a different producer that we were going to work with, and we started pre-production with them, and he actually chose, like, I had all my demos, and Terry had all her demos, and he came in and he chose the songs, and he mostly chose Terry songs. And I was like, oh, okay. But it was also a time where I was really looking to try to create some space for her, because she was clearly super talented, and then he was tied up doing another record, and there was this whole scheduling thing where it's like, well, we have to get into the studio to make the record because we want to make it by Christmas. And finally our management was like, we can't wait any longer. And then we went and found John Porter and did the record.
Right. And did you was it Susan Rogers? Did she engineer or mix it?
She did. Actually, I ran into Susan Rogers a few years ago. She's now a professor at Berklee College of Music.
Yes, bizarrely, I did an interview with her last year, and I thought, and I just saw her on your sort of like, yes, on who did what, and thought, oh, Susan Rogers, that's a name that rings a bell. Yeah, no, it's quite amazing. So it was still a big budget album then. It was still sort of, you had quite a bit of money behind you for that one.
It was a real budget. Yeah, it was like a baby band budget, but it was probably $100,000, but like real money, And there was a studio called Blue Jay Recording that we did both of the records in, right outside of Boston. Very nice studio, which was super fun. I really enjoyed.
Yes. So you did quite a few. You did, is it Super Collider?
Super Collider.
Collider, yes. And then there was Smile, and then you did a Sing to Neptune, which is one that you did.
That's right. I think those were the songs.
So they were the ones. Did you feel that when you went to record that particular album that was going to be the final piece for this sort of band? Did it have that feeling that this is going to be the end?
No. I think we were all still committed to it, and hoped to make a good, record and do well and so forth. I think we're, all sort of into it. But then the record wasn't, but there was very much some tension, in the bands, we weren't getting along and, and so forth, which I think did not help the record. Like we weren't helping each other, and so, Susan and John like mixed it and then, it was released there's a video, we got to make a video for Super Collider, which is fun. And we got to be on TV. If you go search,
well, I will.
if you go on YouTube, put in Tribe Super Collider Conan, and you can see the video of us on TV playing the song.
So did you get a chance to tour at all with that particular album? Did you have any live?
No, not a little showcases, up and down the East Coast a little bit, in a few gigs out of town, but we didn't get a proper tour. We were up for a tour with James. We were supposed to open for James, and then it was never made clear to us what happened, but basically like that fell apart. And so we never really got a proper tour, and the record didn't do anything. And at that point, like one of the people in the band was like, I don't really want to do this anymore. And one thing led to another. It was like, okay, it's time to wrap this up. Because a few of us had other I was writing music for video games, which then went on to become my career. Like I basically spent the next 25 years working on video games, including, Guitar Hero and Rock Band and those kinds of games, which I actually made in collaboration with Eric,
Right. Yes, because actually the 90s, though, musically, it starts quite well, doesn't it? And then we, in this country, have Britpop, which isn't too bad at times. I mean, it's fine. You have, your begins with grunge. It ends in Woodstock 99, though, doesn't it? Which is a bit of a graphic and horrendous weekend of hell. Have you seen the film Woodstock 99, where
I've seen clips from it? I don't think I ever sat through the whole thing, but I'm sort of familiar with it was not. Yeah,
how did you find the music narrative of the 90s being that side of the Atlantic?
The thing that happened to us is like one of the things above and beyond the merits of the music, it's like, sort of glossy bands with synthesizers and women in them, and as soon as, Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, the whole paradigm shifted, right? It was like, in terms of what the record companies cared about. They cared about, Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Superchunk, and that like things changed overnight, right?
Yes.
And that was not kind to us. We were not that, and we didn't have enough of a following at that point outside of Greater Boston to sustain ourselves, But I personally liked a lot of that music. I thought there was still do.
Yes, though then it sort of becomes this kind of metal rap, quite a macho sort of music kind of landscape, doesn't it, as the 90s progresses, which then finishes with, like there's the Marilyn Manson, Red Hot Chili Peppers, those sort of bands, and
Limp Bizkit,
Korn, and
Korn.
Yes, it doesn't, and then this kind of horrendous weekend, which almost seems to be like the Altamont, period for the 60s, where it's like, okay, that's enough. We're going to have to stop this because this isn't good anymore. So I just wondered what you felt, sort of as somebody who was in a band in America, sort of watching it change.
It's a good question, and I don't really have a good answer. I don't particularly remember. Because I was moving on. Like my focus was to, because I stopped making music for years, because I was, just head down, developing a video game career, which was, all consuming and really fun. So I just kind of dropped back to being a, music fan and listening to music, and occasionally something would, pop up that I liked a lot, but it sort of got more chaotic. It seemed like there was various things, and then when the internet showed up, it seemed like it splintered. There was like lots of little threads.
Yeah, and
also like rock and roll kind of, much to my surprise, because I'm sure the same for you, but when I was a teenager, or even my 20s, like that was popular music, was rock and roll, and I just assumed it would be that way forever, and it's not. Right now it's a niche, it still exists, but if you look at the top 100, there's no bands.
No, it's very cheap. So what was your career once the band finished? Did you say you were making music for videos?
I got a job writing scores, interactive scores for computer games, for a company like a little, it's sort of an indie company, that went on to do some very significant games. I was totally right place at the right time. I just happened to walk in the door when they needed somebody with my skill set, and then worked there for about 5 years, started with music and then did some video stuff. And then I ended up in sort of creative direction roles. And then I got recruited to work at Harmonix Music Systems in 1998. And did some music games on the PlayStation 2 that were, critically well received, but didn't really, make any, didn't sell. And that was kind of a paycheck for 5 or 6 years. And then 2005, we did Guitar Hero. We had an opportunity, and Guitar Hero like exploded. And so that was like a rocket sled and really fun.
Yes.
As part of our mandate for that, because we basically got sort of a blank check. It was, it was a small budget game, but nobody was really paying attention to us. So we're like, well, we're going to do, have you seen School of Rock?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Jack
the
Black.
scene where he's like, he's got the blackboard and it's like into all of rock history, this like complicated, like that was us. We were like, we're going to, take the youth of America and we're going to have like this, like rock and roll 101. And so we were very, deliberate about building the list of songs, and we're going to have some punk, and we're going to have some Southern rock, and we're going to have some metal, and we're going to have some pop rock. We're going to hit all the bases so that if you're like, 13 years old and you play this game and you finish the game, you're going to have like a decent grounding in, all the different,
an education.
Yeah, and it worked. It was amazing, because that blew up, and then Guitar Hero 2, Guitar Hero 3, then we shifted over to Rock Band, which is a complicated story, but some of the bands that we loved, we would put in the game, and then they would they developed, people rediscovered these bands. And we got all this feedback from all these mostly young people who just got turned on. Like it was a delivery vehicle for teaching people about music.
God, that's fantastic. My God, that must have been, yes. I mean, after years of struggling in the band, then sort of be able to use your creative sort of abilities to make music for videos and various other sort of computer games must have been a delight, really. And also a bit of security as well.
Oh yeah, no, it was, certainly for me personally, it was transformative. It was, and certainly nothing that was planned. It was all, it was just all kind of random and serendipitous. But yeah, it was, pretty satisfying.
Well, absolutely.
And then in more recent years, actually, Eric and I and some other people, we did another album of songs, which are on Spotify that you're welcome to check out. If you like Tribe, you might like them.
Yes. So which is your next one? Is this Dark Wheels or is this
Dark Wheels? Yeah, exactly.
Right. So that's because you've got a Bandcamp page for this, haven't you?
Yeah, and they're on Spotify and YouTube and whatnot.
So it's almost the band. No, it's not quite the band, is it? Actually, there's just you and Eric and your brother.
It's only me and Eric, my brother Bart, and then then a new singer, a new drummer.
Right, I've got it. So so you started to. Was that sort of during lockdown that you started feeling the urge to put together a band again and sort of make music?
No, that was earlier. That was, oh boy, these dates are not precise, but I'm guessing like 2008 through 2012, 13.
Right.
Like
so you started all the way back there. And so what happened? So was Eric and Terry a couple then and still are?
They were a couple from like 2 weeks after they met each other. Yeah. From like,
right. And did Janet keep making music as well?
She did. She is in a band. She lives in New York City or, thereabouts. And she's in a band called Murdoch. And they have, they play, they come to Boston occasionally and play. It's kind of a low key thing, but yeah, she's still doing it.
Blimey, it's all go, isn't it, really? So everyone is still doing it. So what have you got sort of planned for the rest of this year and next year? Well, not next year because that's miles away. But yeah, so what have you got lined up? So are you still doing your sort of computer games?
No, I wrapped that up this year, like earlier this year. I'm in my mid 60s at this point. So, and it's sort of in the middle of deciding what to do. Last week, I did this exercise where I had all this stuff, like as we all do. I had stuff in Dropbox and Google Drive, and which I had never organized. So I went through and I made a folder with every demo that going all the way back. And so I'm in touch with Eric and Bart from Dark Wheels, and starting to think about doing writing some more songs and doing some more stuff.
Right, so that's the sort of next bit. With America, do you have sort of, in this country, we normally, now retirement age when you get state pension is 67. How does it work in the States? Is that a similar system?
You get sort of this is Social Security, and you can start taking it at age 62. But the way it's structured is the longer you wait, the bigger your checks.
Right.
But I have like a retirement account and whatnot. So, it's like I don't have to work anymore. So I'm sort of, a lot of what I'm doing now is, I'm sort of back. I'm like learning, sort of modern music workstation software, and I'm starting to poke at the AI stuff a little bit, which is really interesting.
Yes.
And just, I'm sort of back in learning mode, just trying to like develop skills and bring myself back up to speed about what's happening, and it's all actually quite exciting. It's amazing.
So your brother and Eric were in a band called Eddie Japan.
They still are. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They still are. So that's their sort of that musical project, and then this is on Bandcamp, and you're doing Dark Wheels, so that's your musical project.
Yes, and it's not even clear. Actually, I was going to call up Eric today or tomorrow, and I don't know if we will call it Dark Wheels. We really have not talked about okay, what is it? What do we want to do? So it may be a continuation of Dark Wheels, or it may have some other manifestation.
Yes. Do you miss sort of playing and being in a band and playing live dates?
Oh yeah, hugely. Yeah, it was like. I was sad when the band broke up. It was I loved it. It was great. I love touring. I love playing live.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say the 2 albums that are on Spotify do sound incredible. So, yes, I hope that more people get to hear it, because it's definitely an intriguing thing. But is it on Bandcamp at all, or is it sort of just on the street?
I'm not sure. I wasn't when we because when we finished it, which again is like, I don't know, 2014, something in that range. The drummer was the guy who, Paul Gallo, who understood. He was in other bands, and so he understood the process of getting it onto the streaming platforms, and so he kind of dealt with it. So I think we did, Apple Music, Amazon Prime, YouTube, Spotify. I don't know if we did Bandcamp. I should go look.
Yes. Well, I suppose it's always quite good. A lot of people are now going through their archives. It certainly did during lockdown. So I didn't know if, yes, and retirement is another one that people think, right, this is it. I'm going to get my archives all sort of digitalized and archived beautifully and, yes, uploaded somewhere.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the midst of that. Like, what do I do with all this stuff,
Yes. Do you have many photographs and posters of Tribe that are still knocking about?
No. The drummer has a bunch of stuff. I have a little bit. But one of my regrets is I wasn't more careful about about holding on to stuff.
Yeah, I know.
I probably have more than because it all went in a box, and then I moved, and these boxes have moved with me, and I haven't really opened them.
Right. Well,
there's probably a box with a bunch of with a bunch of stuff.
You must have some press photos and various other live shots.
You would think, right? There was a fan site that was up for years and years that I think finally went defunct. But that was the clearinghouse for like Tribe stuff. It was like all the demos were on there, and they had, and a lot of photos, a lot of fan photos.
I'll have to try and see if I can find it. I love looking at those kind of, especially old posters and design. The way that people laid things out, which was always interesting.
A lot of it, for us, a lot of the early stuff was just stuff we did ourselves on Xerox machines, like you do, right?
Yes, well, absolutely, and it does have such a beautiful time capsule moment, doesn't it? It does look of its it sort of dates it, but it dates it in a nice way. So yes, I did notice that quite a few people during the sort of lockdown period put together some quite nice books. There was a lot of photographic books came out, but this guy sort of put together a book which is all these kind of the graphics of sort of the punk and post-punk period, which was quite nice.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Yes, and he did 2 copies of it. He did a second one as well. So yeah, it's quite nice seeing those flyers. And I guess people who did it, had no idea that someone would want to put those in a book and have an exhibition and put them in a museum. But they are kind of works of art in their own beautiful way, aren't they? Outsider art. So there you go.
No, and I have huge nostalgia. Like at the time, we didn't really realize, but I have like a huge nostalgia for that period. Because it was really quite special. Like it was a vibrant scene. There was hundreds of bands duking it out. There was all these, rivalries and relationships between all these bands. And there was like a recording studios and the clubs. And, it was really, and then, some really consequential bands like the Pixies and Muses and so forth, Lemonheads, Juliana Hatfield, came out of that. Belly.
Yes.
And it was really fun to be part of that. So I look back on it with great fondness. It was awesome.
Well, it was, and I remember when you mentioned those 2 bands, Pixies and Throwing Muses, saying, "God, they were on a double bill coming around the UK in '89," which I managed to get to see. And
really? Wow.
And at the time, you didn't really just looked at it as, oh, yes, I've heard them on the John Peel show. I'll just pop along £4.50 or £5. And you see these 2 bands, you think, yeah, that was a good night. And afterwards you think, oh, my God, that was such a good lineup, wasn't it? But they were both on the same label. And I suppose it was just very easy to put them on the tour together. But yes.
No, they were both breaking it up at the same time, like they were, like kind of hit the public consciousness and, so... yeah.
And that was me in conversation with Greg LoPiccolo from the band Tribe, talking about his life in music. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.